thought for the day it falls to me. You know, around here we often talk about kinship, of course, and so we want to refine what our sense of that really means and dig deeper in understanding it. Sometimes you can get at it by talking about its opposite, or what are the obstacles that keep us from arriving and entering into the fullness of kinship with each other. You know, everybody knows about enemies beginning to work side by side here. Maybe they don't talk to each other, but before long, there's a union and a bond and a love and a friendship that's undeniable. Or as a homie said to me, I guess I just needed to see his insides. So years ago, I was invited to some fancy schmancy dinner, and I was sat next to a Republican candidate for Congress. And he asked me what I did for a living, and I talked about you and this place and what happens here. And he shook his head and he said, "Don't those people know the difference between right and wrong?" I said, wow, boy, nobody wishes this thing, like gang violence, was about morality more than I do, because then it would be simple, clear, and easy. It'd be wrong, but it would still be simple, clear, and easy. But we can't have it simple, clear, and easy. It's, in fact, complex. Or recently I was privileged to travel with Eddie and Jessica to give some talks up in San Luis Obispo and Paso Robles, and at the end of one of those events, the very last question was from a woman who kind of just took me on. And she had just retired as a prison guard for 27 years, and she goes, "You know, these people fight all the time and stab each other, and there are riots." Once I spoke to a room full of multi-millionaires. In fact, there were a handful of billionaires in the room. And afterwards, a couple came up to me and they said, "You know, we've always taught our kids the difference between right and wrong. Maybe we could come down there and teach that to them." I said, I'd rather have your money, but... Yesterday, Lauren was introducing you again to the Good Samaritan, so we're kind of a tag team here. And so, of course, you know the story. You know, the priest walks past the guy who's in the ditch because he's nearly dead and he needs help, but he walks past him, and the Levite walks past him. But the Samaritan stops and takes care of him. In fact, we call him the Good Samaritan. But what do we call the priest and the Levite? Do we call them bad? No, the interesting thing is that they knew the difference between right and wrong. In fact, the purity code says you cannot touch a dead body, and the gospel says he's nearly dead. So that's a violation of the purity code. You can't touch a dead body. So they didn't look at the Samaritan and say, "Wow, I feel scandalous because I didn't help this guy." No, they felt actually morally superior to the Good Samaritan because he touched the dead body. We don't. We follow the rules. We don't touch dead bodies. But what did the Samaritan actually do? Well, he connected to the guy. He looked at this guy in all his mess and brokenness, and he recognized his own mess and brokenness in himself. And there is the obstacle to kinship. If you cannot welcome the mess and brokenness right here, you're going to hate it over there. If you are not hospitable to the truth of who you are, which is everybody in this room and outside of it has mess and brokenness and need of healing and is a cry for help, it's what joins us together. If you're not comfortable with that, then you will have zero tolerance for it in the world. It's not about good people or bad people. It's not about moral superiority. It's not a high moral distance that separates us and those people. The more we can connect to our own mess and brokenness and need for healing, the more we can remind ourselves that we're all a cry for help. That when you see it in another person, you won't recoil, but you will reach out because you see yourself there. And that's what the Samaritan did. He just saw his insides. So I invite all of us today to connect to our own mess and brokenness so that we can find our kinship with each other.